Again, in the last video, we just finished by going over organs. I gave you these terms to refer to different organs, and then I used the stomach as an example of an organ, which again is a structure composed of more than one type of tissue, and that structure will have a particular function in the body. Now, the next level I've already mentioned is the organ system. I usually get a little lazy and just say system, but the full term would be organ system. An organ system is a group of organs that work together. Group of organs that work together. Now, there's many organs in the body, and when we say that an organ system is a group of organs that works together, different scientists, different people that are studying the organs or studying the body, they might want to put the organs together in slightly different groupings. And because we could put the organs together in slightly different groupings, it's possible to come up with a different number of organ systems. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, so I'm just going to say the most common number that you hear these days is the number 11. That we say there's 11 organ systems, and that's the number I'm going to use. We have digestive system, respiratory system, reproductive system, urinary system, nervous system, endocrine system, etc. There's 11 systems. Now, of the 11 systems, there are two systems that I will spend more time on in this lecture, and they are the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. And the reason I'm spending more time on them is because those two systems, if you understand them, it helps you understand a lot about the whole body. So I'll be talking about the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. Now, so we have the cardiovascular system. Now, you may call it the circulatory system. I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. If you were in second grade, you might call it the blood system. That I wouldn't recommend calling it the blood system. You're probably better off just calling it the cardiovascular system, although it's often referred to as the circulatory system. One of the nice things about calling it the cardiovascular system is that the term cardiovascular tells you what's in the system. Cardio is heart. Vascular refers to blood vessels. And there are 5 kinds of blood vessels. Now, I'm trying to be a little less repetitive because I know you have the ability to rewind the tape. Oh, it's not a tape. You can still rewind it. And I'm encouraging you, don't be in a rush. Take your time with this course, rewind the video, and watch it as many times as you need to fill in all the information. 5 kinds of blood vessels. And first we have arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Now, in defining an artery as a vessel that carries blood away from the heart, that's only telling you half the story. All right, I know an artery is going away from the heart, but where is it carrying the blood to? So I'm going to tell you, the way I want you to think of it is that the artery is going to an organ. That's not part of the definition for artery. The definition only says that it's going away from the heart. But I want you to know it's going to an organ. Now, once you're inside of the organ, the arteries branch, and as they branch, they become thinner and form arterioles. Now, one way to, it's not quite a definition, but one way to think of an arteriole is it's a very small or thin artery. And in saying that an arteriole is a very small or thin artery, one thing that means is it's still considered to be going away from the heart. But the other thing I want you to know about the arteriole is that it's in the organ. So the artery goes to the organ and gets into the organ, and once the artery is somewhat inside of the organ, it bifurcates, which is a fancy word for branches, and as it branches, it becomes more narrow, and at a certain point where it's quite narrow, we call them arterioles. So we have arteries, we have arterioles, then we have capillaries, and I'm going to change the coloration. Arteries, arterioles, capillaries, so the arteries go to the organ and into the organ, they bifurcate to form arterioles. Then the arterioles continue to branch until they form microscopically thin, this is important, microscopically thin capillaries. So one feature of capillaries is they're microscopically thin. And capillaries is where exchange occurs. Exchange means something is crossing a membrane. Something is crossing a wall. So this is the capillary, and blood is flowing through the capillary. When we say exchange occurs, oxygen leaves the capillary to supply the tissues. O2 is the chemical symbol for oxygen. That's a 2, it's not a Z. Nutrients, N for nutrients, leave the capillary. They cross the wall of the capillary. Carbon dioxide is formed in the tissues. The capillaries in an organ. What's an organ made out of? An organ is more than one type of tissue. So the tissues, and what are tissues made out of? Cells. So the cells are forming CO2, which can be toxic. So we have to get the CO2 away from the tissues, away from the organs. The CO2 goes in the opposite direction. It goes into the blood. Oxygen, nutrients are going out of the blood. And that's called exchange. Materials crossing, in this case, the wall of the capillary. You don't have exchange in the arteries, arterioles, venules, which we'll come to in a moment, or veins. The only place you have exchange in the cardiovascular system is where the blood is going through capillaries. And that's because the walls of the other 4 vessels are too thick, materials can't cross the walls. Now, let me just continue this for now. The capillaries now come together. So the pattern is reversing itself. As we go from the heart through arteries to arterioles to capillaries, the tubes have been branching, and as they branch, they become more narrow. Once you get through the capillaries, instead of branching, the tubes start coming back together, and as they come back together, they become wider. Now, once the blood has gone through the capillaries, now we're going to say the blood is on its way back to the heart. We're still in the organ, but the capillaries come together and form venules. Now we're still in the organ. So the arterioles, the capillaries, and the venules are in an organ. But even though we're still in the organ, we can think of a venule as a small vein. If we're thinking of an arterial as a small artery, we can think of a venule as a small vein. Now the venules come together, and as they come together, they form veins, which leave the organ and go back to the heart. The veins carry blood back to the heart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kinds of blood vessels. I started this portion of the lecture by saying the nice thing about the phrase cardiovascular system is it tells you the parts of the system. Heart, 5 kinds of blood vessels, and blood. So the term vascular primarily refers to blood vessels, but to a certain extent, it could also refer to the blood itself. So those are the components, the parts of the cardiovascular system: heart, 5 kinds of blood vessels, and blood. I keep trying to stop myself from erasing it too quickly, but I really don't need to worry about that because you can pause the video. Have I told you to pause the video? Have I told you to rewind it if you need to? I think I have. Now, what I just explained, I'm going to explain again. It's going to be a little tricky doing it on camera. Okay, so you've got, I'm going to explain all of that again, outlining the cardiovascular system on my body. So we have the heart, it's a pump. There's a large artery that comes out of the heart, arches over, and goes down. It's called the aorta. So the very first artery coming out happens to be coming out of the left side of the heart. You needn't concern yourself with that specific detail right now. But there's a large artery coming out of the left side of the heart that goes one place. Pardon me, and there's a large artery that comes out of the right side of the heart that goes only to the lungs. So we think of the heart as a left pump that ends up pumping blood all over the body, and a right pump which pumps blood to the lungs. So I mentioned that, don't worry about it for now. So this large artery comes out, arches over, goes down. From that arch, there are 4 branches. So where do these 4 branches go? So arching over, one branch goes to the left arm, one branch goes up the left side of the neck, the third branch goes up the right side of the neck, the fourth branch goes to the right arm. I kind of left a little bit out there. It's actually 3 branches, and then one of the branches again, giving you a total of 4 branches. I'm not going to say how many branches are coming out of this arch. I'm just trying to give you a general idea of how things work. So you end up with 4 branches. Where do they go? Left arm, left side of the neck, right side of the neck, right arm. Then the arch comes down, goes down through your torso. Torso is shoulders to hips. Goes down through your torso, branches, and then now you can't see my legs, but one branch goes into each leg. So that's where the arteries are going away from the heart. And I said I want you to think of arteries as going to organs. Now if I say think of the arteries in the torso branching off that main artery and going to organs in the torso, it's easy to picture organs in the torso: the liver, the stomach, 2 kidneys, the small intestine, the large intestine. All of these organs that you can visualize in the stomach have arteries coming to them. But even in your arms and your legs, I want you to think arteries are going to organs. Arteries come up to your skull, what organs are in the skull? Obviously, the brain, the eyes, the ears, etc. But again, even in the arms and the legs, I want you to think about the arteries are going to organs. Now, what structures do you have in your arms or in your legs that can be thought of as organs? You might want to pause the video and think about that for a moment. Well, it might be a little hard for you to really answer this, but take a minute and think about it. What structures do you have in your arms and your legs that are organs? They satisfy the definition of organ. Well, you've got skin, and the skin is an organ. You've got several muscles in your arms, several muscles in your legs. Each muscle is considered to be an organ. Now, if each muscle is considered to be an organ, what must be true about each muscle? And here, these are review questions based on work I've already covered. Notice whether or not you know the answers to these questions. If you don't know the answers to these questions, you're not keeping up, and you're going to end up doing poorly on the test. I'd rather see you keeping up and doing well on the test. So use these review questions to your advantage. Make sure you know the answers. So I can't remember exactly where I was, but what else besides the skin is an organ in either your arms or your legs? Each muscle can be considered an organ. So what must be true of each muscle? It must be composed of more than one type of tissue, because for it to be an organ, it has to have more than one type of tissue. And when we get up to the muscle system, you will learn about the different tissues that we find in each muscle. Biceps muscle, triceps muscle, and all the other muscles. You have bones in your arms and legs. Each bone is a structure. Each bone has got more than one type of tissue, and therefore each bone is considered to be an organ. So even in your arms and your legs, we consider the arteries to be going to organs. Hope that ride wasn't too rough for you. So I'm going to draw a bit of an outline of what I just went over with you. So we start with the heart. There's that large artery. It happens to be coming out of the left side of the heart. It's going away from the heart. It branches. And then branches some more. And then it branches some more. So these are just branches. And as it's been branching, the branches become more and more narrow. And then the vessels start to come back together. Some people like to get colored pens or pencils to take their notes in color. It's not a requirement, but you might want to think about it because they do enjoy using the colored markers. All right, so the reddish pinkish vessels are arteries, which by definition are going away from the heart. They branch. And what are the black circles? Now, within the black circles, these reddish pinkish vessels would be, and maybe you should really be able to figure it out, I'll tell you, but can you figure it out? What are the reddish pinkish vessels in the black circles? What are the green vessels? What are the blue vessels in the black circles? Well, the red or pink are the arterioles. I almost had enough room to write arterial. Then what's the green? The green would be capillaries. What's the blue? Venules. So then what are the black circles? Have you figured it out? The black circles are organs. Each black circle is an organ. The venules come together and lead to veins. And the veins, by definition, go back to the heart. Now, I've color-coded the picture. Where it's red or pinkish, it's oxygen-rich blood. And where it's blue, it's oxygen-poor. O2 again is oxygen. Oxygen-poor blood. Now, I've explained enough for you to be able to answer the question, how or why did it go from being oxygen-rich to oxygen-poor? Where in the diagram is it going from oxygen-rich to oxygen-poor? It's going from oxygen-rich to oxygen-poor as it's going through the capillaries. So here it's oxygen-rich, here it's oxygen-poor. As it goes through the capillaries, we have that exchange. The oxygen leaves the blood to supply the cells and the tissues. Now, in the venules, the veins, it's oxygen-poor. Now, I'm going to put something in the picture which is incorrect, so please don't copy it into the picture. It is incorrect. If I were to say oxygen-rich blood goes away from the heart through arteries, comes back to the heart, I'm going to move this a little closer, comes back to the heart through veins, and then, and this is the part that's wrong, so don't copy it. It goes through the heart, and then it goes directly back out through the arteries. Now, I hope it's obvious to everyone that this is wrong. It can't work this way. So take a moment, pause the video, and think about why is it necessarily the case that this can't be right? And have you paused the video? Don't cheat. No cheating. It can't be right because we'd be left with the question, where is the oxygen coming from? Oxygen-rich going out, oxygen-poor coming back, and then suddenly as it goes through the hearts, how would it become oxygen-rich again? It can't work that way because the heart doesn't have any direct source of air with oxygen. So that's not how it works. What happens instead is, as I said when I outlined the pattern on my body, coming out of what would be the left side, you can't tell left from right in this picture, but what's coming out of what would be the left side of the heart are arteries that go all over the body. And then what comes out of the right side of the heart are arteries. Where do you think they're going? If their job is going to be to pick up oxygen, what organ, or two organs, same organ, but you've got two of them, where would they go? Can you figure it out? Well, if you want to pause the video, pause the video. Don't forget to turn it back on, though. You've got two of these vessels, and they go to the two lungs. I'm only drawing one lung, but they'd be going to two lungs. Now, I'm going to ask a question. It's not really a trick question, but students often get it wrong because they leap to an answer. They jump to an answer. You have to get in the habit of checking your answers. And here's how you check your answer. I'm going to ask a question, And my question is going to be, what kind of a vessel is that? Now, as soon as I say, what kind of a vessel is that, for most of you, some answer is coming into your mind. Here's how you check the answer. You take the answer that just popped into your head and you ask yourself, what does that word, what does that answer mean? And check, does the meaning of that word match the question? So here's the picture. Here's the picture. The question is, what kind of a vessel is that? And the answer is, it's an artery. Now, people often get this wrong. Why do they get it wrong? Because they see it's blue. And over here, which I said represents oxygen-poor blood. Over here, all the blue vessels with oxygen-poor blood, they're veins. Here it's a vessel, it's blue to represent the fact that it's oxygen-poor, but it's not a vein, it's an artery. Well, when I ask the question, what type of a vessel is this? If you thought vein, and I say check the answer, so you say to yourself, well, what does the word vein mean? A vein is a blood vessel that goes back to the heart. Well, then you know the vein can't be the answer because the arrow is going away from the heart. A vein goes back to the heart, so it couldn't be a vein. So almost every artery in the body is carrying oxygen-rich blood. But these, let me make sure I said that correctly. Almost every artery in the body is carrying oxygen-rich blood. But the arteries that go to the lungs are carrying oxygen-poor blood. What makes them arteries, it's not the oxygen content, it's the direction of blood flow. So these are arteries because they're going away from the heart. These are veins that go back to the heart, even though they're red, indicating they have a lot of oxygen. They're veins because by definition, veins go back to the heart.